develop a transitional Zimbabwe industrial reconstruction and growth plan, which will run from 2024 to 2025. Our Honorable Minister, our Honorable Minister is expected to present this transitional plan anytime now, and it will run from 2024 to 2025. It will leverage on the quick wins which we targeted during our implementation of the first industrialization policy, and it will be run for less than 18 months. I will just give a quick overview of the manufacturing sector. Zimbabwe at the moment has got about 94 subsectors, producing about 7,000 products. We used to produce 9,000, but we are down to 7,000. These sectors include things like food and drink, tobacco, clothing, motor industry, paper, printing, just a few of them. The sector has been on actually recording an upward capacity utilization trend from 2019 to from 36.4 to 56.1 in 2022. However, the recent survey showed that there was a 2.9 decline in 2023 to about 53.2. That is the trend analysis of the capacity utilization, which shows that at the moment, I think we're at 53.2, and we work with CZI and Zimsters to ensure that they do give us that trend analysis every now and then. Over the last 3 years, the manufacturing sector invested in new equipment totaling about 743 million. They took advantage of the Second Republic's ushering in of the auction system and also the facilitation of import and capital equipment through VAT deferments. The sector at the moment is actually importing about 52% of its raw materials requirements, with the pharmaceutical, printing and cotton subsectors importing at least about 70% of raw material requirements. It means, we have a challenge to ensure that we strengthen the local value chains. When we come to employment figures, we note that it has got the greatest multiplier effect. It means that for every job, there are 4 to 6 downstream jobs created. The recent labor survey report also shows that the manufacturing sector's employment contribution increased from 7.5% in 2019 to about 9.7% in 2023. This is the graph that shows what is contributed by the manufacturing sector, including, of course, the commercial sector. An analysis of our import bills shows that we are spending huge sums of foreign currency on imported products in instances where the local manufacturing sector has potential. There's therefore an urgent need for us to target these products and deliberately support them. Key imported products for the last 6 years, you find that we are importing a lot of tires. I think we're spending about 200 million per annum. Motor vehicles, I think it takes a bulk of our foreign currency. We are also spending a lot in fertilizer, also spending a lot in pharmaceuticals, crude oils, among others. This is showing the amounts that we have spent. You can see on motor vehicles there, we're spending quite a lot. Even on fertilizers, we're spending quite a bit. And even on iron and steel, we are hoping that with the coming in of Malaysia, it should be able to assist us to reduce that import bill. On cement, I think spending quite a lot on cement as well, importations. The challenges that the sector is having, of course, is ease and cost of doing business. I think the regulation and compliance, antiquated equipment, availability of electricity, informalization, which was a topical issue, smuggling, counterfeit products, and export diversity issues. The opportunities in the sector, in line with the theme of climate, we see an opportunity in the investment of solar assembly. We also see investment opportunities in lithium value addition and beneficiation. And then we also see the rural industrialization as an area that can attract opportunities. The value addition on the small grains, I think yesterday the people were discussing about the shift from maize. We know that some of the bigger companies already, they are investing in production of noodles. We've got about 4 big companies that are already producing noodles to some extent, and we understand that we spend about 40 million importing noodles. So you find that some of the companies have taken advantage of that gap and are coming in with investments. Irrigation also, it's important that the manufacturing sector takes advantage of that. On climate change, we note that the manufacturing sector at the moment is also producing a lot of emissions. You know, companies like in the production of cement, iron and steel, electronics, plastics, among others, they are accounting for about 1/3 of the greenhouse emissions. I continue to say that the manufacturing sector has got opportunities to invest in the renewable energy, the water conservation and management, building of greenhouses, waste management, the circular economy. I now touch the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We ratified the AfCFTA agreement in 2019. And then the trade under the AfCFTA officially commenced in 2021. There were negotiations to establish the rules of origin, which determine the source of goods, which were finalized in 2023. We want to recognize that out of the 41 of the 55 member states, including Zimbabwe, we have successfully submitted our schedules of tariff concessions to the AfCFTA Secretariat. I think you should clap hands for us because we were lagging behind. Our tariff offer, it encompasses about 6,600 tariff lines, and these lines are categorized based on the harmonized system used by the international trade. The tariff offer of these, we've got about 6,606 lines, which are basically in 3 categories, A, B, and C, with the varying tariff lines reduction. The largest portion of the category A accounts for about 5,956 tariff lines, which is 90% of the total. Products in this category will have import duties phased out entirely within the 5 years of the AfCFTA operationalization. Most of these are raw materials. Category B, which has got 455 tariff lines, 7 of the total import duties on these, 7% of the total. Import duties on these products will gradually be eliminated over a 10-year period. The final category C is the smallest, with just about 195 tariff lines, which consists of about 3% of the total. These products are considered to be sensitive by the Zimbabwean government as well as the manufacturers, and these normally include your soyas, your cooking oil, your cane sugar, beverages, cigarettes, pipe, tobacco, and cement. I think we are able to produce those adequately in Zimbabwe. The products with high export potential, I think the World Bank did an analysis and was saying that Zimbabwe is one of the countries that will benefit from the AfCFTA. You find that in our areas where there's export potential is the agriculture products, things such as tobacco, cotton. You also have manufactured goods, textiles and clothing, leather products, processed foods and beverages. And then in the mineral sector, of course, there's gold, platinum, lithium, and chrome, among others. However, the challenges that are faced by Zimbabwean companies include the infrastructure constraints, I think, because when you are exporting, you need to have adequate support in that area. And then the regulatory hurdles, the financial constraints, the lack of competitiveness. I think the NCC does issue out reports on where we are as far as our competitiveness is concerned. Then there's trade and information and knowledge gaps. Considerations to be made: we need to invest more and more in transport infrastructure. We need to embrace new technologies. I think the AI is with us here. We need to also ensure that we have access to affordable financing, that is long-term financing. We also need to have energy security. I know that some companies have actually invested in solar panels, so it's important that they also, accelerate that area. And then we also need to streamline trade procedures and reduce barriers. In a nutshell, I want to say thank you. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, whoa. That even woke me up, didn't it? Right, ladies and gentlemen, before we move into our session, Amaima Kombe, of course, we'd invited her to come and give a talk to really look at some of the issues. And I tell you, some things are eye-opening. For example, $600 million, $200 million on tires, $664 million US on vehicles. Yeah, I'm not even going into fertilizer when we have someone like Sable Chemicals there, and I know Ministry of Industry and Commerce is working flat out to resuscitate that. Pharmaceuticals, we're importing most of our drugs into the country, yet again, we have the capacity to produce our own drugs under license. And you can see why manufacturing capacity is only 53.2%. So there's a lot of room there for value addition, import substitution, and really cutting down on some of these costs that the ministry knows about where we don't necessarily need to be doing it. And I also point us, for example, to the road infrastructure, where the government deliberately raised the profile of local companies so that local companies could build our infrastructure rather than bringing in foreigners. So things like tire manufacturers and even opening up cars, if I'm a little bit more dramatic, and opening up the old, remember the old Quest and the packs, the kits we used to bring in. Fine, they may not be as good as a Discovery, but they're good enough to drive on the roads, and it'll save us $1 billion a year. So I think these are some of the issues that need to be done. But also, more importantly, African Continental Free Trade Area. Are you ready for it as business? Because it's moving ahead. In fact, it's not even moving ahead. It's a done deal. So the question now is, you need to know what's in it, you need to know the opportunities and be able to seize them. Now, because of Amaima Kombe, our morning session is all around carbon credits and so forth, we thought let's just give you an opportunity, just a few questions for her, looking at the presentation and anything on industry and commerce. I'll open up the floor, and if there's any questions, brilliant. Thanks, Prof. Can I ask the Minister of Finance, ushers, please? Thank you. There's one question. Anyone else, guys? Yep, two. Thank you. 1, 2. Yep, I can take 4 questions. 3. Thank you, Honourable. I'll tell you what. Let's start with Honourable first, if you don't mind, and then we'll come to you, Prof. Honourable.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my question is linked to project preparation and the extent to which we package our investment opportunities given the multiplicity of the agencies that we have. Minister of Industry and Commerce, I've seen you have got a desk for promoting investment. Then we have got the Minister of Finance and Economic Development is promoting investments. Then we have got the ZEDA is promoting investments. Minister of Foreign Affairs promoting investments. The danger that we have is when you have got so many agencies doing the same thing, we may end up literally with no one doing anything. So I wanted to find out how coordinated are you to make sure that all these agencies are really promoting investment, because on the ground you end up not seeing exactly what is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable. Prof? Thank you, and then thank you, sir.
Morning. Thank you very much, Chief Director, Ms. Makombe, for few issues. One, you talked about the launch of the Zimbabwe National Development Plan by your ministry, but it's 2024 to 2025. We are already, 2024 is nearly gone. 2025, if you launch after the budget, whether it, in summary, I'm saying, you launch, I'm not sure whether it will have an impact on the ground. Two, you said, among others, pharmaceutical industry is still importing 70% or so. But last year, from 2022, a study was funded by UNECA, sub-region, Southern United Nations, among others, was on local content threshold on pharmaceutical. I thought that study was supposed to help to reduce that. Maybe if you can update us there. Then on African Continental Free Trade Area, you say category A, those 5,956 tariff lines to be reduced removed the tariff within 5 years. We are in the 4th year. I thought you should update us. How far have we gone? And lastly, I like when ministry talk about challenges, especially things like ease of doing business and the regulations. You are the ones who are supposed to remove those challenges. And if you cry, like us private sector, where are we going? You are the ones who are supposed to reduce all those things that just need sometimes a word of mouth, and it doesn't need any cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, where are we? Let's go there first, please. Thank you. Next to you, Doc. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Mine is on the issue of tires. And this issue, it has been on the agenda for quite some time now, but it seems there is no clear strategy to solve the problem. As it is, I'm from the city of Bulawayo. We have Dunlop there. And if you go there, it's an eyesore. And we have seen the statistics. Every time we go to a meeting, we have seen the statistics coming. And I don't know whether maybe from a treasury point of view, working with the Minister of Industry, maybe in the budget we should really look into this issue and see how best we can support companies like Dunlop, because certainly they will reduce this import bill if we finance these companies. Even in the ownership of those companies, whether it's a private company, if it is a private company, maybe government should then think around and say, shouldn't we come up with a parastatal which will be doing this thing? Because the tires, they are increasing our import bills. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutama.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you, Member Makombe, for an insightful presentation in the direction in which we are going in terms of trading. I'm just concerned to say, in the Africa Free Trade Area, are all countries involved? If not, then I envisage a problem, because we are already struggling with importation of things from all over the world. And with the relaxation of trade barriers within Africa, when other countries are not part of, I envisage a problem of transshipment, where people from outside will bring in through a member party and then transship it to the other non-member party at a lower cost to avoid costs. So there is a danger there that we may end up having huge influx if everyone is not subscribing. Then I also concerned that as a country, what is our strategy given the opportunities availed by the African Free Trade Area? How do we capitalize on this opportunity? Because we can't just wait to see things happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. We'll close the questions there. I think, Doc, what you've emphasized is actually very important about people not really looking at the document, because I'm sure Mai Makombe will talk about rules of origin and how that protects us from that, exactly what you're saying.
Thank you very much for those questions. I'll start about the one on the ZEDA Minister of Finance as well as Minister of Industry doing investment. Just to say that within ZEDA, we have seconded an officer from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and we work along the whole of government approach where we share information. But us as a Ministry of Industry and Commerce, most of the companies, the investors that come to visit us, normally they would be wanting to know specifics around the manufacturing area to say who is in that sector, what are the rules and regulations, what incentives are in there. But we find that we have strong collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, ZEDA as well. I think on the ZEDA portal, you find there is quite a lot of information on the manufacturing sector, which of course we have contributed to that. And then on the launch of the 2025 to 2025 document, this is a transitional document that we know we have already moved a bit on the 2024, but we are trying to align ourselves with NDS2. We couldn't come up with a document when there is NDS2, which is going to be just around the corner. So we thought that we should come up with a temporary document. Then after NDS2, we ensure that we align the successor Zimbabwe Industrial Development Policy number 2. And then on the study that was done pertaining to focusing on the pharmaceutical sector, I think the key issue there is the offtake, because the pharmaceutical industry is saying that as long as NatFarm does not procure from them, it becomes a problem. So we are working around to ensure that we engage NatFarm. We've been engaging them, so that even engaging PRAS, so that they do put local content, bias towards local pharmaceuticals in order to assist. And then on the AFCTA, I think it's there that we are slightly behind because of our tariff offers. But the thing is that whenever you join AFCTA, at whatever level that you join like, that you'll have to apply the tariffs that are required at that time. Then on the regulation of compliance, we note that yes, it's a challenge, and it involves key sectors. It's not necessarily under the purview of the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, but we are engaging other key stakeholders so that they assist us. Coming to Dunlop, sorry, I didn't want to say Dunlop, but anyway, Dunlop, we have engaged them, for them to resuscitate the Dunlop plant in Blaawai. But they tell us that they need about 12 million to resuscitate that plant, and we are still in talks with them. But we have also seen that we can identify an investor, that can go in and put a plant. It's 60 million. We can get a plant, but we keep on putting that in terms of our investment engagements. Whenever we go outside the country, we always advise investors to come into that area. And then the other one, I think it was... AFCA, are all countries involved, rules of origin? I think it's just a comment, that one, because really, like I said earlier on in my presentation, the number of the countries that are already on board is clearly there. And then I think our strategy as Zimbabwe, we do have a strategy that we're working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. But I think what is key is that we need to ensure that the ease of doing business and is facilitated, because we have competition in that area where other countries within the AFCTA are approaching, investors and saying, come and invest in our country so that you can take advantage of the opportunities that are out of AFCTAs, because they will be putting it in a global way. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, a big round of applause. Amai Makombe, Chief Director, Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Thank you. You can go. Please keep clapping. Thank you so much. I think just very briefly before we move on, to answer your question a bit more, Sasishan Doc, probably 95%, if not more, of African countries have signed to the African Continental Free Trade Area. And one of the major concerns was exactly what you spoke about, like someone bringing in chickens into Zimbabwe and then we repackage and re-export them. But they are what they call rules of origin, very strict rules of origin, which you have to comply with and get certified. So that cannot happen under the AFCFTA. Right, we move on with our program. Linda, our session starts on this climate financing.
All right, and the next, we're still on the the session on private sector initiatives, including carbon financing to support development under climate change. And our next presentation is from Conservation Focus CEO, Dr. Joyce Chuma. Please put your hands together as she comes forward.
Just go down. Please keep clapping. I told you, protocol, protocol. Welcome. You should be okay, I think, on these.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. No, it's fine.
I think I was getting excited. Thanks for reminding me, Prof. Linda, can I have the program, please? Right, we'd like to call up the panel. As usual, our standard as we go. Panelists, if I could call up, please, Sakai Kubarika, of course, CEO of CZI. Sakai, please come up to the table. Victor Steenberg, please give them a round of applause from the World Bank. Nigel Chanakiwa. Nigel, I know you're here because we had breakfast together. There's Nigel. And Godwin Murewa. And the chair... The Sir Accountant General, Ministry of Finance. Thank you, Edwin. Please, a big round of applause for our panelists. Yep, just remember protocol. Keep going, keep going. I'm sure the Accountant General will remember you clapping. Sakai, do you want to move? In fact, you're right here. Right, Joyce, I leave it to you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation is going to be on greening Zimbabwe's future, and I'm going to be focusing on green bonds. What is important for us is to understand the background and the context of my work and the context of climate finance. So you realize that it's important for us to understand why it's important for us to be talking about innovative financing systems. So we need to understand that where does the money come from if we want to implement projects in climate adaptation or mitigation? It's also important for us to understand the misconceptions that are within Africa in terms of where that money is supposed to come from and whether those avenues are practical. So in the first instance, you realize that we have got only 3% flowing into Zimbabwe. It's not that we have 3% because we don't entirely have access to all finance, but sometimes it's because we don't have expertise in trying to solicit that kind of finance into Zimbabwe. Not only do we have a small amount, but you also observe from the 3%, Zimbabwe has got a target which is almost close to 15 billion, based on adaptation cost about 10.3 and 4.8 for mitigation. So this is what we want to achieve before we get to 2030. So the question is, where does the money come from? There is misconception that the money should be provided by government 100%. That's not practical, because you also observe even in the global north, 49% is coming from the private sector. But if we were to ask the question, how much has the private sector contributed to adaptation or climate finance in Africa, you find it's a very small proportion. So it's important for us to realize that even if we go to COP29, just as we did COP27, COP28, and ask for loss and damage in terms of the funds, the truth is you understand that there are deliberations which need to be made, which may even last up to 2030 before we are able to resolve these issues. So the question becomes, what happens to Zimbabwe in the interim? This is the reason why now we decide to talk about innovative finance mechanisms. Examples include carbon credit, green bonds, blockchain finance. So it's important for us to understand the reason why we are talking about this is because government has got other sustainable development goals besides the contemporary issues of climate change. So for us to expect them to give us 100%, according to international standards, those are not the best practices. Best practices are that the private sector should be contributing the larger share to climate change and mitigation. So this brings us to the reason why then people thought about theories. I'm sure you acknowledge everything around us, be they clothes, glasses. Someone thought about them, even aeroplanes, but the moment you talk about it, people will say this doesn't work, or if it's a plane, what if it doesn't go into the sky? So I acknowledge that with innovative finance like carbon credits, bond markets, people are worried whether these things will work, but I think we have no choice given the situation in Zimbabwe. You acknowledge, as highlighted yesterday, that government is under constraints in terms of finance. They acknowledged that, and we need to take that into consideration. So if we are speaking of 2030, we need to be practical in terms of what is possible for us. Let me just emphasize and say, even if we are talking of climate finance, what is prominent is that we have money from multilateral development finance institutions and governments, but that money is what we are currently having now, which is not enough. So that's the need for us to venture into innovative finance systems, and I'm going to talk about green bonds. So in short, if I can simplify what a green bond is, in layman's language, we are saying you are borrowing money from investors so that you are able to invest in projects, for instance, green projects, or which we can call environmentally friendly projects. And to do that, we are using mechanisms such as the green bond. But I want us to see the situation which is currently prevailing across the globe. In terms of the value of green bonds, you can check if you look at the diagram. We should be having a green component in the diagram, but it's not there because Africa is not in the market, or we have a very small share. If you look at the figures there, you find a focus on corporate green bonds. They are currently occupying 57% of the market. It's also important to understand what are people focusing on. Because if you're asking someone for money and you want them to invest in agriculture when they're interested in renewable energy, it might not work. So it's important for us also to be practical by understanding what people are funding. So this is just the general picture of what is happening in Africa. South Africa is occupying almost 73% or 74% of Africa's market. And those are the only players in the market right now as we speak. That's Morocco, Nigeria, Kenya, Seychelles, and Namibia. As you observe, Zimbabwe is not there. If you look at where is the money going to, if people are giving you money for green bonds, where does the money go to? You understand there's energy, which is taking a larger share. You have water, buildings. If you focus on what we deliberated on for the past 2 days, we mainly talked about agriculture. But globally, I have seen that most investments, although there is sustainable agriculture, that's not where the money is going. So if you come up with proposals requiring billions of dollars, but you're asking for projects that no one is willing to fund, it's likely that you will not get that money. But because there are benefits from investing in these, you can actually still generate revenue for other products or other use of proceeds in this case. So in general, we are saying, where is the problem? The problem is that the conventional methods of getting money for climate change are not enough. That is the reason why we need to start thinking about other alternatives. So those are the objectives. The main objective was that to look at the potential of corporate green bonds in Zimbabwe, then also to look at the success stories of those who have done it in Africa. I'm sure you acknowledge we have, in my case, I have mentors, I think 4 or 5 in here. They taught me once at undergrad at University of Zimbabwe. There were small things that they told us. And I'm sure one of the things that I put in mind was I would want to have a doctorate in my life. It was difficult, but I'm just saying they told me something which got me here. So in the same token, you find it's good for us to look at the examples in Africa and find out what is it that made them successful. And we copy the right methods, but obviously you tailor-make them to your situation. So in terms of the methodology, I looked at the case studies and policy analysis. Why was this important? There was no data for me to analyze because there's no data in Zimbabwe with regards to carbon markets or to green bond markets. So the only practical method was to look at what is tenable given what others have been doing because there are international practices that are prevailing across the country. How does one determine whether green bonds was the most probable or the most important instrument to look at? So from the wide array that I talked about in terms of blockchain or whether carbon credits or these are the things that you look at. Financial feasibility. Can we talk about financial feasibility of carbon credits now? They may need 4 or 5 years before I can even issue those carbon credits, which means I can't get to 2030 relying on carbon credits. But this was one of the most practical based on that. So it's important for you to understand why did I say green bonds and not blockchain? It's because I was looking at those fundamentals in terms of their efficacy in climate adaptation. So in general, if you look at the findings of the study, one of the most important things is that South Africa has got a well-established green bond market. So there are a few lessons we could draw for the Zimbabwean example. For instance, someone would ask, so which companies are likely to issue green bonds? I'm sure you can see names there. We have ZEDCON, which is comparable to ZESA. We've got Standard Bank, which is comparable to banks in Zimbabwe. We have got ABSA, Nedbank. We've got property companies. We've got City of Cape Town. So these were involved in certain areas. But what you're going to observe on all the cases is there are certain types of projects that they finance. In this case, there's renewable energy, energy efficiency, a bit of sustainable agriculture, and green buildings. So from 2012 to 2023, South Africa has managed to have 4.2 billion, but much of that period was the planning phase. It was not the implementation phase. So it takes time. It could take a year depending on how much you have in terms of resources or in terms of the stages that you'll be focusing on. Then the other one is Morocco. Morocco is a good example in that they only focused on renewable energy and a few enterprises. But it's important that when you have money, you don't do everything. You have to say maybe for the next 3 years, we are only going to focus on renewable energy. In the next 3 years, we focus on sustainable energy, or you have a mix. But it's important not to do everything because it will be very difficult to spread money on different enterprises or different categories of projects. So what is important about the Moroccan example is that they are well known for having a success story in renewable energy because that is what they only focused on. Then you also analyze and understand that they worked with international partners. With green bonds, there are people who are helping countries that are willing to do this. For instance, the Climate Bonds Initiative. You also have partners like the World Bank, the IFC, USAID, among others. So it's important to understand we can't do it alone. There are people who are already doing this and they are willing to help, but if we don't go to them for assistance, they would never know we are interested in doing this. Then the other issue also has got to do, so Kenya is more comparable to us because we've got more or less similar economies. One of the challenges is that we learn a lot from Kenya because they first did it in a way that was challenging and then they corrected their path. But what is also important or very critical about Kenya is that they were able to adopt what we call the Islamic green finance. So the Islamic green finance are principles which are used by the Islamic population in terms of investment. Why was that important? If you look at the track record of what happened at COP28, amongst all the countries, Kenya was one of the leading countries that was able to get pledges or finance commitments from the Islamic finance population. Reason being what is within the Islamic population. So it's important to respect diversity because within that we are able also to tap on different investors. Then the last part is also to then reflect on all this in terms of the Zimbabwean situation. So what does this imply for Zimbabwe? It's important to realize that we do have a good foundation in terms of policy and regulation with regards to supporting a bond market. I can distinguish this one from carbon credits because it's a bit different. If I can give an example, we really don't need much new legislation for green bonds because some of the issues are already covered in those different aspects. It's quite a wide array. I just put that so that you understand the magnitude of what government has already done. So we do have policy support, although we may need a bit of interventions. It's also important for us to understand that what is important is the support that you get from government, because even if the private sector is to do this, generally public perception rises when people understand that government is giving support. So in this case, we are not asking government for money. We are asking for support to support the private sector to make sure that this happens. So in essence, some of the lessons are that by respecting diversity, we may be able to tap on different investors because they use different principles in terms of investment or supporting climate finance. Then the other issue is that although we do have regulations in the financial industry, they are not enough to capture what is required under green bonds because there's environmental integrity which has to be incorporated within that regulation. So although those support systems are there, there's room for improvement, which is essential to have the private sector initiate these kind of motives in Zimbabwe. So in general, I only have, I'll summarize the policy recommendations here. You find that one of the things I recommend is that we should embrace Islamic green finance. The reason being, if you look at the proceedings from COP28, they were one of the major promising funders for climate change, but you can't have them coming to you based on the kind of fundamentals we're using. We need to understand how they do it. Then we see if we can conform to that. So the first recommendation is there is the proposal that maybe we should embrace Islamic green finance. Then the other one is also that we need to spearhead a green initiative, and this is the recommendation to the Minister of Finance. Reason being that in other countries like South Africa, National Treasury was instrumental in pioneering this, not necessarily giving money, but that kind of support, telling them what is wrong within the market and what needs to be done, and then for endorsing such kind of initiatives. For instance, let's have a green program, a green bond program. It has stages. So in this case, what we've done, what has been done by ZSE is that if we have a chain of 7 things that should be done, ZSE was able to take portion 3, but then it means the remainder of the entire chain is missing. The reason why it's important for the ministry to put that kind of initiative. Then the other things, I think they were mentioned in other presentations before, in examples of tax incentives, highlighting that it may look as if you are losing income now, but once those companies are operating, definitely you're going to be able to take taxes, because with corporates, definitely they are charged corporate tax, among other things. So it's important that those other aspects that are given, like capacity building, stakeholder engagement, are part of the package of what we are calling a green initiative. So it's important for us to look at this. So in conclusion, one of the most important things is that we can learn a lot from South Africa, Kenya, and Morocco, because they have done projects that are successful. As an example, if you look at Kenya, they looked at student housing. I'm sure many of you acknowledge most of our universities cannot accommodate them, or you can have a university with 26,000 in terms of enrollment, but they can only accommodate 3,000. Would it imply that there's no demand for housing? Definitely, I know it's there. So if someone is willing to invest in this and you have student housing across all the cities that we have in Zimbabwe, those are practical things that we can actually do in Zimbabwe. Then in terms of what we should focus on, it looks like globally, those 4 that I've highlighted, the renewable energy, sustainable water, sustainable agriculture, and green buildings are some of the major things that people invest in. But amongst them all, I've noticed that sustainable agriculture is at the bottom. The one that seems to be at the top is renewable energy. So it's important for us to embrace this, because the 15 billion I talked about, in truth, even if we come back next year and ask the Minister of Finance for this, I don't think that is practical for us to expect them to give us money. If we keep expecting loans, it also means we are going to have more problems in terms of the debt crisis we're already facing. So these are some of the practical ways that we can address climate change. And for this, I thank you for listening.
Please, a big round of applause. Dr. Joyce Chuma, Conservation Focus CEO. Joyce, thank you very much indeed. She will be taking questions from the floor, so don't worry, she isn't leaving us. She'll just be taking her seat. Some of the numbers are astounding. We need 10.3 billion for climate adaptation, 4.8 billion for climate mitigation. And of course, it isn't all about government. It's about private sector also coming to the party. But of course, they're coming not because, of course, it's just throwing money at it, if I can say. These are economic reasons why they're putting money into green bonds. Globally, a lot of it is in energy, building, and transport, which accounts for about 75% of total green bonds. But without me going through Dr. Chuma's presentation, a very good presentation, please give her another round of applause. She did so well. I think what is clear is that it is an avenue for exploration, the issuing of green bonds and other green instruments, and I think it's something that we should be looking at seriously, both from a policy perspective as government, but also in the private sector, to understand how we can leverage our natural resources. Because I think it was it the UNDP yesterday? They said that as much as we're going through climate issues, there are opportunities for Zimbabwe. We mustn't look at the climate issues as gloom and doom. If we take the right steps, we make the right steps, we can mitigate it, as well as, of course, take opportunities to leverage it into financing structures for our economy. Right, let's move on. I'd like to now, speaking to us on unlocking the carbon potential of Zimbabwe, potential projects and the required policy and institutional frameworks, please join me in welcoming Africa Wildlife Foundation Youth Policy and Partnership Officer, Mr. Collins Shava. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause.
Thank you, and all protocols are observed. So my name is Collins Shava. I'm the Youth Policy and Partnerships Officer from the African Wildlife Foundation. And as an organization, our main mandate is to protect and promote wildlands and wildlife in Africa. So I'm going to be presenting about unlocking carbon potential of Zimbabwe, potential projects, and the required policy and institutional frameworks from our research. And we were a team of young researchers. Some of them are not here, but I'm representing them. We had Mr. Wellington Matsika, our Senior Policy and Partnerships Officer, and Walter Mpezweni, our GIS specialist, who also played a key role in this research. So I'm just going to just run down a background, and I also then discuss, as other presentations, our findings and our methodologies. Carbon credits and offsets have gained attention as a way of addressing climate change and biodiversity loss and other environmental problems. And there is so much interest around them because there is money involved. And estimates show that revenue from the voluntary carbon offsets market will grow to about 50 billion in 2030, up from 2 billion in 2021. And governments, particularly those like Zimbabwe and developing countries, have an opportunity in carbon markets through establishing the relevant legislative and institutional frameworks to support carbon market development, to also tap into this potential area. So just a background, just a general overview. There are about 9,640 carbon projects globally in about 142 countries. 60% of them are in India, the United States, China, Turkey, and Mexico. For obvious reasons, some of these countries have been advanced in terms of their economies, and they are already tapping into this. In Africa, we are looking at countries like Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Malawi, and Madagascar, accounting for 10% of all projects globally. So these are the leading players or the leading countries in Africa. And then Zimbabwe has 26 active carbon projects, 10 of them which have issued credits. The majority are still at formative stages. And for some of them, 20 of them are under the gold standard, and some of the 6 of them are under the Vera registry. And from the 20 that are on gold standard, some of them have already been suspended due to various issues that I will not say, but they are indicated on the gold standard website. And there are about 2 which are currently registered under there. And this number, 26 as well, is also way below the global average, which is 67. So Zimbabwe's share for carbon projects is low, accounting for only 0.27% of projects globally. But however, Zimbabwe has also retired. What we did is that we did a literature review of the potential areas for carbon removal potential to estimate carbon quantities and revenues. We also triangulated our data by obtaining relevant literature to identify the key priorities, and also we used satellite. As I was saying, that you can see, these are the numbers that I was talking about in terms of where our carbon projects are. Our projects are registered, the gold standard and the Vera as the voluntary carbon markets. And 20 of them, as I said, are under the gold standard, and 6 are under 3 that are yet to issue credits, and 3 that have been issued credits. And as I was explaining earlier, the others that are on gold standards, about 11 of them or 10 of them, some of them have already been sectors where carbon projects are. So we just did an overview of which categories of carbon projects are there. That's what we were looking at in all these registries in the management. And we indicated these 5, which we think Zimbabwe can play a role in. So you can see in agriculture, globally there are 552 projects, and in Zimbabwe there is 0. Industry, there's 1,661 projects globally, and there are 3 in Zimbabwe. And in terms of greenhouse gas management, there are 1,572 globally and 0 for Zimbabwe. In terms of renewable energy, which we see potential for Zimbabwe to take on. And looking at, you can see the renewable energy and energy efficiency leading in the front against the other sectors, forestry, GHG management, agriculture, Uganda and Rwanda, they're having a say in the share. So in terms of mapping it out, putting out major projects, and you can see the Chirisa Red Plus project, which is in a light lime green up there near Matusadona area. And you can see the Nemene Solar Lights project, which is most taken from Mashonaland East, Mashonaland West, coming down to Masvingo. And we have the Manicaland Safe Water Project, which is one project, particularly in the Matabeleland region, and the Ngambo Sukumi Gwai Sukumi projects down there in Gwai, and also now areas which are boxed in green borders. If you can see the green borders around the Vic-Falls that are dotted across central Zimbabwe. And in terms of carbon sequestration, which is the health of the ecosystem to sequester carbon. And you can see where there is a dark green, a yellowish color, it's where areas that are low, but also sequestered in these areas that we are talking about. So, and then when we go to protected areas, the potential that is in protected areas. So this is the botanical garden, the national reserves, the national parks, the recreation parks, the safari areas, the wilderness areas, and so forth. The potential carbon or carbon credits, or the money that we can potentially have as annual revenue from these areas. But ideally, it's not to say that you are just going to get this money for free. There's a lot of investment that is required. Potential in wildlife management areas where we can generate 1.1 million credits annually. Conservation agriculture is a potential area where we can generate about 913 million tons of carbon annually, and also the issues of efficient technologies for issues like tobacco curing and also energy for people. So our recommendations is that we need to explore carbon projects in protected area network of Zimbabwe, comprising of those national parks, safari areas, and community wildlife areas, which has untapped potential for carbon credits projects. Reconfiguration of the conservation agriculture projects, that is the Pumvuza Intwasa project, to integrate carbon credit. Currently, in its setup, you would need to change a lot more things to also put eco-friendly inputs and to ensure that you can tap into this. Also, the issue of considering the change from using tobacco or using wood fuel for tobacco, and also for energy use at households where we have 61% of the population using wood. An ecosystem of policies that promote sustainable practices to foster carbon removal and reduction. And a government also should expedite the process of achieving full readiness of the Article 6 so that they can also tap into the compliance market. And lastly, the Zimbabwe agroeconomy has the potential for carbon credits to unlock additional revenue while addressing also the environmental challenges. And there's also an opportunity for us to leverage synergies that are presented by carbon projects. Because when a carbon project is coming, particularly maybe a RED+, it's not only going to look at carbon, but also going to look at downstream. What is the communities getting? What are the RDCs getting? Then we can ring fence some of those revenues to protect that. And with this, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Collins. No, don't go anywhere. Yeah, remember, it's your 15 minutes, so please sit down. That was a great presentation. Please give him another round of applause. You know, it's you think it's easy when people come up here, but it's quite tough to present. But I must say, though, a few eye-opening topics or issues coming through from your study, and congratulations on a good study. I mean, let's look at some of the projects. The one I particularly want to focus on is globally agriculture, 552 projects, Zimbabwe 0. Energy, 2,420 global, 21 Zimbabwe. Forest, where we have abundant forest, 1,661, we only have 3. GSG management, 1,572. And I think the summation, the conclusions that Collins brought up make sense, don't they? In the sense that we should to ensure happens. Now, our next speaker was on the program was Cesar Chief. I'd like to move on with our program now to speak to us on conceptual framework for value addition of Zimbabwe's natural graphite for application in energy harvesting and storage devices. I must say it's something, again, the title of the talk makes me I'm interested. Please, Paul. Come on, don't forget protocol.
So thank you, Andy. So my name is Engineer Paul Chawagarira, coming from China University of Technology, Department of Material Science and Engineering. And for today, the topic that we're going to be discussing, the issue of Zimbabwe's natural graphite for applications in energy harvesting and storage devices. Sorry, it's not responding. Zimbabwe is endowed with natural graphite. That is confirmed, primarily from 3 regions, looking into the Urungwe region, Makonde region, and the Wange district. And estimates say that we've got reserves of up to around 1 million ton graphite, basically being pushed by graphite's application in the battery market or in the electric vehicle market. You will see data that will present to actually buttress that. But there's a big question there. There's little to no value addition of graphite resource in Zimbabwe. And if you're going to go on the website for the Zimbabwe Chamber of Commerce, they actually say that there's general exportation of graphite and things like lithium in the raw state with minimum value addition. So what were the objectives of this study? Number one, we wanted to look into analyzing the current state of graphite value addition in Zimbabwe, or the graphite industry in Zimbabwe. Number two, we also wanted to actually study the trends in the region and in the globe with regards to how resource exploitation of graphite and resource utilization of graphite is actually happening. Then number three, we then wanted to develop the conceptual framework on how we can actually begin to harness our own graphite resource as a country. So what are the methods that we used? Basically, we did a SWOT analysis to basically try and position ourselves to say, where are we as Zimbabwe and where can we go? What are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and what is the opportunity? Then it was also important to also do a comparative analysis with regard to those that are actually doing it in the best practice mode, and also trying to learn as to what we can actually borrow and begin to implement. Then obviously important was to also do a policy analysis to say from a policy point of view, what is actually happening, where do we need to improve, and what can we actually begin to put together so that we can actually have an active graphite industry in Zimbabwe. So information we're getting is that in Zimbabwe for now, we just have 1 mine interested in graphite. That was Dink's mine. And you notice that this mine is operating around 2018, which is about 10 years ago. And it was by then, it was barely producing 100 tons per month. Again, whatever product that they were producing, it was mostly being exported as concentrate or close to raw material. So over the years, we've noticed that few investors on record have started to show interest in such setting graphite mining at Link's mine. Case in point, the issue of fossil mining resource around 2021. Now in 2023, we hear of IRISE that is also interested in investing, but we are still to see meaningful trends coming out from those discussions. Then local industrial consumption of graphite is currently insignificant. So you notice that if we have people that are going to use graphite as an electrode material in probably processing of chromium, because that's some of the that's somewhere where we can actually see it being actually utilized. So the good thing here is currently government is actually spearheading what is known as the Mapinga Mines to Energy Industrial Park. And what I like about this is that there's actually mention of actually having a graphite processing. Because if we are to position ourselves at around 2024 where we are now, you notice already that the trend is beginning to see more demand of graphite than supply. And we're ignoring it. But this is what is happening. There's a general rise in anything in Zimbabwe, yet we have a resource. This is a serious area where we actually got potential. So what are the figures? As of 2023, the natural graphite market was valued as approximately 2024 to 2030. So there's a definite growth that is being projected with regards to the demand for graphite. So you notice that that demand for graphite is basically being pushed by statistics from 2018 to nearly 700,000 metric tons of graphite by 2025. So we want to continue pushing for the application of graphite in energy harvesting and storage devices. The figure on the corner there, where we have given a diagram of the battery cell, you notice we are mostly concentrating on issues to do with lithium. That is on the cathode side. But we're forgetting that the anode of the cell is graphite. Why are we not being interested in it? Because definitely we've got a growing demand. Definitely we've skilled human capital in Zimbabwe. But what are our weakness? Infrastructure, macroeconomic stability, and the local graphite, the local market. If we could produce these batteries in Zimbabwe, it would mean that we are doing very well. So the idea is, let me go just break a bit. If we produce like battery-grade graphite and begin to make things for solar energy storage, that is the idea here. So what is the conceptual framework? Again, most of these things we've actually talked about them. Case in point, I've divided them into 3 areas. Number one, they are foundational components. We are simply saying the policy environment has to be right, and there is need for infrastructure investment. Number two, there are operational components that we need to also walk through. The real assessment of the resource that we have. We really need to know what we have and why, and refine our graphite so that we have high-grade products. And number 5, integration with the energy device manufacturing sector. And for this, I'm talking to the private sector to say we've got companies that are already doing batteries. We need to switch off from lead acid to probably lithium ion and do that very well. Then there's also that strategic component where we are saying, let's go for the knowledge-driven industrial development concept, which is being spearheaded by our minister, Honorable Professor Amon Muruya. He talks a lot about a knowledge-driven economy. He talks a lot about Chimurenga Chepfungwa. Let's utilize the knowledge we have to produce products. Then the last slide that I have is about policy recommendations. I've got 4 policy recommendations in this case. Number 1, let's increase investment and supporting activities involved in critical energy transition minerals. Number 2, let's develop strengthened policies that will send Zimbabwe to better harness critical energy transition minerals and generate revenue from them. So we need to push more on the revenue that we can generate from our industrial minerals. And to do that, we need to stop exporting raw material, raw minerals, and begin to value add more. Then number 3, let's also clearly establish our green energy trajectory grounded on Zimbabwe's industrialization and economic development objectives. That's very important. It's not a one-shoe-fits-all. We need to custom make what we want to do as Zimbabwe, and we need to engage more conversations about that. And lastly, let's include graphite as one of Zimbabwe's strategic minerals as we go into NDS 2. I thank you.
Thank you. A big round of applause for, of course, Engineer Paul Chagwa-Gawiwa. Thank you so much, Engineer. Do you want to grab a seat at the end there? I think what is clear, even though he may have focused on graphite, what's clear is the abundance of minerals Zimbabwe has and how we should be looking at leveraging them more. And I think graphite production, so there's some good recommendations there for us to explore that more, but also, of course, look at other minerals, particularly rare earth minerals. We have plenty of rare earth minerals, and in fact, we have some of the biggest deposits of rare earth minerals, and I tell you, people want our minerals around the world. So that's a great presentation. Another big applause for Engineer, please. Thank you. Before I call my next, I'm not sure if anyone is, you probably won't be able to see me because I'm holding your glasses case. So anybody who has a glasses case, if you'd see someone peering like this, pat them and say, Andy's got your glasses. Okay. Right. Now then, let's move on. We'll have our next presentation and then Papers TV Network Facebook page, Ministry of Information, as well as the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. Please keep your questions coming in. I should have a chance in the next Q&A session after tea to start putting some of your questions to our panel and to our delegates here at ZEDCON 2024. Of course, this is ZEDCON 2024 under the theme Building Resilience and Driving Economic Transformation under Climate Change. I'd like to thank our sponsors, UNDP, POTRAS, NCC, Cicada, NASA, and the Ministry, of course, of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, who are our hosts. And please, another big round of applause for us. It was on your desks. Well, to speak to this, I'd like to call upon Cicada Africa ESG Systems Manager Jenna Van Niekerk to talk about the Cicada Climate Fund White Paper. Please, a big round of applause for Jenna.
I would like to write on all protocol observed, and thank you for joining us for this excellent conference over the last couple of days. Perfect, thanks guys. So, firstly, I want to start off by saying our paper is not an academic one, but rather a proposal. Sorry, let me go to this slide. So essentially what we're presenting today is the Zimbabwe Private Sector Climate Fund Initiative, Unlocking the Global Finance Opportunity. This has been prepared by Cicada, between myself, Jenna Vanikuk, the ESG manager, Karen Giri, our commercial director, and Nick Deswat, who is our CEO. So we'll start off with the problem explained. So in Zimbabwe, we have a really big problem of deforestation. Circa 262,000 hectares of deforestation happens every single year. Just that, to put that in your mind, that's the size of mana pools that is deforested every single year in this country, which in turn negatively impacts biodiversity as well as ecosystem integrity, and this negatively impacts rural communities and their ability to withstand and adapt to climate-induced shocks. Deforestation is largely driven by the rural population's requirement for energy, which obviously comes from indigenous firewood, and about 61% of the country's total energy supply comes from indigenous wood. So another thing that the deforestation supply chain guidances, this means it could threaten our international market access for key export commodities such as tobacco, which we know is a billion-dollar industry, only second to mining, and horticultural produce, which contributes 6.5 more and more demanding higher environmental standards within their supply chains. And if we don't deal with this, this is going to negatively impact Zimbabwe's access to international markets. So what's the opportunity here? Well, historically, the private sector hasn't been motivated to deal with environmental issues. This is not just a Zimbabwean challenge, this is also a global issue. But with the advent of carbon markets, there's an opportunity to fix environmental problems, making them commercially viable. So it's essentially we're turning a liability into a tradable asset, taking an environmental challenge and turning it into something that can be commercially viable. And NDS1, our national forestry policy, national clean cooking strategy, and national agricultural policy framework, as well as the tobacco transformation plan. So under the Paris Accords, Zimbabwe has committed to certain nationally determined contributions, NDCs, which I must note are conditional on financing. Targets include the reduction of emissions by 40% per capita, I think we heard this yesterday, increasing natural forests by 100,000 hectares per year. So just to put that into context, so 100,000 hectares of additional forest per year means reversing 262,000 hectares of deforestation and adding 100,000 hectares. So in essence, that's 360,000 hectares of reforestation that we need to deal with in order to reach our NDCs. And also improving domestic energy efficiency by 22% is another target. Under NDS1, improving biodiversity is a target. Under the National Forestry Policy, reducing deforestation and increasing indigenous afforestation is a target. And improving access to clean cooking solutions, as highlighted yesterday by Dr. Magombo, the PS of Ministry of Energy, is also a key target. So this is great, and we have some seriously ambitious, we have some very good policies and some seriously ambitious goals, but often the NDCs and environmental goals are at odds of other policies. So the tobacco transformation plan, we want to increase tobacco production, and we want to increase agricultural production in order to reach middle income by 2030. So how do we do this? Can we do this? How do we square the circle and achieve it all? The short answer is yes, we can actually do it, but the longer answer is a little bit more complicated. I think it's been alluded to in a couple presentations before this that there is a huge amount of global climate finance out there. About 4.5% is being received by Africa, and a very small portion of this is being received by Zimbabwe. So how do we attract this global finance into Zimbabwe? Why are we not accessing this financing? We believe that Zimbabwe needs a credible, scalable, and investable structure supported by a competitive policy framework to access climate finance. The government of Zimbabwe has explicitly acknowledged many times that the private sector is key to mobilizing this capital. Sorry, let me just get my notes. So what is our proposition? So Cicada is proposing a holistic and cost-effective approach to achieve Zimbabwe's climate goals through carbon markets. The proposed fund offers a credible structure for funding reforestation and conservation-related activities, which will address the underlying drivers of deforestation. A key idea behind I'll just show you the structure. So essentially what we have here in the structure, and the white papers have it in detail, is that we would have Cicada as an equity investor, putting our current projects that we have in place, which are detailed in the white paper, alongside impact investors who would receive a return as well as impact, the impact on their investment, and a senior lender. On the bottom there, we've got a summary of our different projects, which include planting 10 million trees over 10 years, distribution of 570,000 clean cook stoves, 10,000 hectares of climate-smart agriculture, and 120,000 hectares of conservation under management. Now, something that's key to this, the pathway to regeneration, are clean cook stoves. So if you leave Miombo woodlands alone, they will regenerate on their own. They will do the work for you for free. You don't have to do anything. Reforestation typically costs $1,500 to $2,000 a hectare. Leaving Miombo woodland alone and letting it regenerate at 5% per year does the job itself. So it's letting nature do the work by taking the pressure off it. Another key aspect of the fund is bootstrapping the returns of the cook stoves to create additional impact. So cook stoves create indirect, immediate impact through avoided deforestation. These returns can then be reinvested into the fund to tackle harder, longer-term initiatives such as reforestation and conservation. The proposed fund not only addresses the primary drivers of deforestation, improving the country's national forests and climate resilience, but it also helps to ensure market access, generating inward income into the country and increasing government revenues. This slide is just a summary. Sorry, this is a key point. This structure is scalable, and we can replicate this structure, which I think is really key because $30 million is a really great number to deal with, and the impact is imperative, but we need to scale this a lot more, considering that our NDCs are costing in the region of $14 billion. So below here, we have a summary of the activities and impacts, and I'm not going to go $65 million. 18.3 million tons of CO2 will be reduced or removed as a result of this fund, and $77.5 million of government revenue will be generated over the project life cycle. Key to note here is those little letters there, LOA, which I'll go into detail on now. So again, just highlighting the revenue potential there. So policy recommendations. What can government do to catalyze this? How do we incentivize investment? Through a smooth and predictable process, and as I said earlier, an attractive policy framework, and simply put, attractive returns. What can Zimbabwe do to ensure the above? Well, we already have SI 150 of 2023 in place, which lays out the pathway for carbon project approvals. However, since its promulgation, not one carbon project that has gone through the process laid out in that SI has been approved. Currently, the carbon sector is the most heavily taxed sector despite trying to address environmental challenges. Other sectors such as tobacco and mining attract a levy of between 1.5% and 5% and then pay corporate tax. Currently, the private carbon sector has a 30% levy on revenue and then still has to pay corporate tax. This is not incentivizing investment. So, as I've said here, we mustn't put the cart before the horse. To generate the tax and levies, we need to incentivize this investment. And if there's no investment in carbon projects, everyone loses. The environment, communities, investors, the economy, and the country as a whole. So although the carbon framework addresses some key issues relating to operationalizing carbon projects, under the current structure, the taxes and levies create an unattractive environment for investors. So how does the government address this without losing revenue? Instead of decreasing the levy to be more competitive, rather create access to a preferential market that attracts higher prices, i.e., create a market where carbon credits sell for more. Everybody wins. How? So we have an adequate framework in place to start with. This can be improved on over time. For example, we could have differentiation between onshore and offshore project developers and how they are taxed, differentiation between carbon project sectors, i.e. private, public, or community, and project types, land-based versus technology-based. However, instead of waiting for Article 6 framework to be in place, which, by the way, is an excellent initiative and is really putting Zimbabwe at the forefront of the carbon markets, current projects that are ready to go, that are already going, need to be approved. And this includes providing access to preferential carbon markets through the issuance of what is called a letter of authorization. So one of the sections in our paper goes into detail on carbon markets, and it can be quite detailed. But essentially what a letter of authorization is it means that the country, Zimbabwe, is committing to issuing a corresponding adjustment to the purchaser, i.e. they will not double count that carbon against their NDCs. And this can come into play when the registry and legal framework are in place. So credits sold with an LOA fetch a higher price. Credits on the voluntary carbon market, where the government gives nothing and there's complete private sector investment into that project, and they take all the cost and all the risk, fetches $3 to $4 a credit. With a 30% tax on revenue, plus paying corporate tax, you can see that a project is just not going to make sense. So again, I go back to the fact that these are projects that are dealing with environmental issues and trying to deal with climate resilience and climate change. We are being heavily taxed. However, projects that are given a letter of authorization and the corresponding adjustment, the government is giving away something. They're giving away the right to count those carbon credits or carbon emissions against their NDCs. But by doing that, you can have a 30% levy and make it viable. Again, the differentiation between an onshore and an offshore project comes into play because with corporate tax. But I mean, these are slightly more technical things that we can go into with the panel. But what we believe is that an LOA can be issued under the current legislation, and I think that's key to take home. Section 4 covers that. So the investment unlock for Zimbabwe and what follows. So this investment structure offers a win-win solution for all stakeholders interested in addressing Zimbabwe's deforestation problem. And this is something that is very important to us as a business. With government support through tweaks to the current carbon framework, including issuance of letters of authorization, we, Cicada, have 600,000 credits ready to sell immediately. However, without these policy amendments, no carbon projects will be viable, resulting in loss of revenue and, very importantly, key environmental and social impacts. So these are just the highlights of the impacts, just to finish off. 77.5 million in taxes and levies over the project lifecycle, $35 million of funds invested, 10 million trees planted. Just to highlight, this is 10% of our NDC target. I think that for one company to be able to achieve that target is quite commendable. 18.3 million tons of reduced CO2 or removed CO2, 570,000 stoves distributed, which equates to 570,000 hectares of degraded woodlands saved over 5 years, 120,000 hectares of effective conservation bordering tobacco growing areas, and 10,000 farmers trained in conservation agriculture. I'd like to end off there and thank you all for your time. Here's a QR code for everybody to scan if they would like a soft copy of our white paper. And thank you again to everybody for organizing ZEDCON. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you. I'll grab a quick seat in Obi just for a second. You know, one thing that's interesting is when we talk climate fund. What have I done? Oh, back. Okay, there we go. There we go. And I'm sure there's two. Cicada, there's more papers, and there's another lady there. So, okay. So what is clear, and I think it's something that we need to start understanding, is exactly what climate fund is. How do we structure climate bonds? What about green bonds? I think it's important that because at the moment I think a lot of people, we kind of understand the concept and how we can get the credits and all that, but we don't really understand how we can do it. And I think that is probably some of the discussions that we'll be asking the panel and Jenna and, of course, all the other speakers and presenters during the panel discussion. Right, we are going to take a very, very quick break. In fact, congratulations, I'm actually ahead of time. It's fantastic. So we can reconvene at 11 a.m. We're going to take a tea break. Now, On your way out of the door, there will be gifts for you all. And the sponsors of the gifts are Potras and also Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. So please, Potras and Ministry of Finance for the gifts. Give them a round of applause. You're going to be getting some gifts. I, of course, like to acknowledge our sponsors, UNTP, Potras, NCC, Cicada, NASA, and, of course, our hosts, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. So, Chair and the panelists, I would like you to, when you come back for tea, please come straight back onto the stage, and then Chair will hand it over to you to take us through the session. So enjoy your tea, 11 o'clock, and of course, those of you watching on ZEDCON Prime, don't go away. We'll be back at 11 o'clock. We'll see you in a bit. Take care. Tea. Thank you.